Pesahim Daf Vav, a number of very important and interesting topics today. We're going to start off with a topic that does not have to do with Pesach, but rather firstborn animals. It is related to what we just spoke about yesterday, which is that sometimes if something has partial ownership, so if a non-Jew deposits some chametz with me, but I have responsibility for it. If it gets lost or stolen, I have to pay for it. So then I am as like a part owner, and that is a problem. So since we talked about part ownership with non-Jews, we're going to talk about another couple of cases where partial ownership makes a difference in the halacha. And so the first one is a bechor. Any animal, if I have some animals, flock, a firstborn animal, kadesh li kol bechor is holy. I have to give it to the kohen. Okay, that's however only if I own it myself. There's another halacha that if I'm in a partnership with a non-Jew and we jointly own the firstborn, then the non-Jew doesn't have to, is not has no obligation to give it, and therefore I don't have to give it at all. This is actually an important loophole today because nowadays people have firstborn animals if they're a farmer, but they give it to the Kohen. The Kohen can't really do much with it because there's no Bet HaMikdash. So this actually is a good loophole. If you give a non-Jew a partial ownership, then you don't have to worry about this. Okay, so this is the question that was asked to Rava. Ba'umine me Rava. Rava is the fourth generation Babylonian Amorah. Behemat arnona. The word arnona, anybody ever live in Israel? Then you would know this word. This is how they say taxes in Israel. So that means taxes here. But in this case, the tax collector comes and says, I want you to give me a certain number of animals from your flock. Chayevet b'bechora or en chayevet b'bechora. So there's no partnership here. I own all the animals, but since the tax collector has a claim, has a lien on some of my animals, so do you consider that kind of like a partnership that he has partial ownership in the bechor, and therefore I don't have to donate the bechor to the kohen or not? That's the question. Okay, before Rava answers it, the stam of the Gemara adds a clarification and says, Kol hechad demaseh mesalek lebezuzeh la kami ba'yalan dechayav. And it says, if the tax collector would accept money instead of the animal, he doesn't care if you give the animal itself or the value. He just wants to collect the value. So if you can give him money and buy him off with money, then certainly everyone would agree that you have to give the animal as a bechor, because the tax collector just wants money. He doesn't have a lien on the animal itself. So everyone would agree there. That's not the question. Kikami bayalan, when they asked that question to Rava, they were asking about the other case, where the tax collector specifically wants animals. He has a special use for them and not money. So then the question is stronger. It sounds like he does have a partial ownership in the flock. Not in any particular animal is true, but in the flock in general, and therefore, would that be sufficient for me to not have to give the bechor at all? Mai, what's the answer? Amalehu pitura. Rava answers, you don't have to give the animal. You don't have to give the bechor. Okay, good. So that's the answer. However, we have a braita. This is the opposite. Braita is much stronger than Rava's Amorah. Braita says that you do have to give the firstborn. Hatam de maseh. No, that braita was talking about the other case, the case where I can give money instead of the animal. So you see, because of that braita, that's why the stam had to add in that clarification beforehand. Okay, all that is one version of the answer, of the question and answer. Now we have a second version. Ika de amre, the same question. The question was, again, right, if the tax collector claims some of my animals, do I still have to give the bechor to the kohen? Amarava behemat arnona petura min habechora ve'af al gav demaseh meselek le. So Rava here says that a tax, the animal that is owed in taxes, I do not have to give it as a bechor, because we do consider that partial ownership. And even if I could pay off with money, it doesn't matter. So this version is more lenient. So even though I could pay him off with money, really he has ownership over my animals, right? And I'm just now redeeming it. I'm like, okay, let me buy it back. But the initial lien is on the animals, even if he would accept money. It doesn't matter. Okay, good. You see, by the way, that Rava's statement here is half in Hebrew. That's Hebrew. And then it goes, switches into Aramaic. Whenever you see this, it's most likely that Rava's words actually were the Hebrew ones, and the Aramaic ones are a later editor's explanation of his words, right? So we can see here that Rava's words actually originally were this is probably the original, because even in the first version, the only words he says are pitura, right? Well, in the first version, it's a question and an answer. And the second version, Rava just has a statement. So I don't know if it was originally a question and an answer, or probably it was a question and answer. And then eventually people just transmitted it as a statement, as the bottom line. But they further explained that that even if you could pay with money. Okay, now we have a problem, because remember that braita that said chayevet? Rava here now said patur, but what about that baraita? Well, we can apply that baraita to a different case, which is isat arnona. Sometimes a tax collector comes around and says, I want everybody's dough, not money dough, dough, really made out of flour, right? Chayevet bechala. So regarding dough, we have a similar halacha, that anytime I make a big dough, I have to take challah, give it to the kohen. But that's only if I own it myself. If I jointly own the dough with a non-Jew, then non-Jew doesn't have any obligation. So therefore, there is no obligation to give challah to the kohen when the non-Jew owns part of it. Here, the tax collector, the non-Jewish tax collector, came and said, I want some, right, you have to give me some of the dough. So now he has a lien, here he's a partial owner. And so therefore, if there is a tax on dough, then I don't have to give challah to the kohen. That's what, then you do have to give, right? So dough is different from the animal, that you do have to give it to the kohen. And that's that baraita was to say chayevet is referring to the case of challah. Now we're going to ask, what's the difference, right? Both are the same law. In both cases, the tax collector wants it. In both cases, there's a halacha that if a non-Jew owns a part of it, then I don't have to give it. So why are you making a distinction that animals, I don't have to give the bechor, and challah, I do have to give to the kohen? My tama, behema itle kala, isa letle kala. Literally, that means animals have a voice, dough does not have a voice. But we're not talking about the animal braying. We're talking about a marit ayin issue, which is that if someone's making dough, all right, outside, and the neighbors are looking and they say, oh, look, the neighbor, she made dough and didn't take challah. And everybody will wonder. So therefore, you have to take dough, because people don't realize that there was a tax collector and the person gave that dough in tax, because no one hears about that. Animals, however, are a higher priced item. So if the tax collectors come around and say, you have to give us the animal, and a person gives a cow to the tax collector, everybody talks about that and everybody knows. So when they see, hey, he had a firstborn animal and he didn't give it, the bechor, to the kohen, everybody will already know it's because he gave it to the tax collector. And so that is the distinction between the two. In other words, from the Me'ikar Hadin, the essence of the law, both are considered partnerships and you don't have to give, but because of Marit Ayin issue, that's why Isa, the dough, one does have to give. Okay, very good. So that's the first item on our agenda. Second item is chametz of a non-Jew in a rented room that's owned by a Jew. So this is be related to, well, I don't know if you have an apartment bill, if you own an apartment building and you rent out rooms, right? Or if you have a live-in housekeeper, maybe that's considered, if it's the housekeeper's room and no one else goes in there, maybe that would be considered something like that. Or an office building where you have non-Jewish.
My house in Jersey that I rent out.
Oh, you rent out a house, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So all these would be relevant cases to the following. So we'll talk about that. And let's see. Tenor Rabbanan. We have a baraita. Goy shenichnas lachasero shel Yisrael ubeseko beyado en zakuk levaed. Baraita is going to present three similar cases. The first one is a non-Jew comes into my courtyard and he's holding some dough. Right? I don't have to worry about that, since even though he's in my property, but he's holding on to it. So obviously it's his, he's responsible for it. I don't have to kick him out. I don't have to grab the dough and burn it, right? So that's okay. But if the non-Jew comes with his dough and gives it to me and say, hey, can you hold on to this for me for a while I go out and do some errands? That's a problem, because I'm holding it, and I'm responsible for it. So that's not allowed. Even though I'm not, even though it's his dough, but because I'm responsible, that's enough of an ownership. That's a problem. ייחד לו בית, אין זקוק לבעל, שנאמר, לא יימסה. However, if he comes in and says, can you hold this dough? I say, listen, go to the room over here in my house, and that's your room, okay? You can do whatever you want in that room. You could put any stuff you want there. Then that's okay, because since I simply gave him access and own and control over that room, so I'm not responsible for what happens in that room. If if it gets lost, that's his problem, and therefore since I'm designating the space for him, that's permitted. Okay, and then we end with the pasuk shneimar lo yimaseh. Now the question is, we have three laws. Which of these laws is lo yimaseh telling me about? See, the last one was a permission, and lo yimaseh is a prohibition. So what exactly does this mean? So that's this baraita. We have a couple of Amoraic statements explaining it. Maika amar, amar papa, the fifth generation Amora, aresha ka'eh, v'hachi ka'amar, hifkido eslo, zakuk leba'ed, shneimar lo yimaseh. It's going on the beginning. By beginning, he means the second case, that if the non-Jew says, here, please hold this for me, then I have to get rid of it. I'm not allowed to take it. I'm not allowed to have it because lo yimaseh cannot be found in my possession. And this would be in my possession because I'm responsible for it. Okay, good. The next generation, Rav Asher, sixth generation, says no. Le'olam asefa ka'eh. He likes that because it comes right after, right? The pasuk should come immediately after the thing is trying to prove. And so it is in fact trying to prove the last case of permission. And this is how you read it. ייחד לו בית, אין זקוק לבעל, שנאמר, לא יימסה בבתיכם, והלאו דידהו, דגוי כי כמעייל לביתה, דנפשה כמעייל. So if you gave him a room and said, this is you could use this room for whatever you want, then it's okay, because it says lo yimaseh cannot be found in your house, but this room is no longer yours, because the non-Jew can go in and can go out, and so he whatever he does there is for his own use, and that's okay. This might be the source for why a generation ago, at least in this community, we people if they sold their chametz, they would bring a key to the shul and give it to the rabbi, and the rabbi would give it to the non-Jew, say, here's a key, and everybody would give keys to their homes so that the non-Jew could come in and out of their homes, and maybe even a key to their to the closet where the chametz was, right? And so that way, it's not only even though I'm selling the chametz, so it's owned by the non-Jew, still it shouldn't be in my house. But if I set aside a place and I say, this is the non-Jew's room, this is the non-Jew's closet, and give him a key and he can come in and out, then that fulfills this this problem also. All right, we don't usually give keys anymore. I guess the idea is we assume if he knocks on the door, then you have to give him permission to come and take whatever chametz he wants. All right, good. Now we have a question on this. So you're saying, if I rent out a room, it's considered the non-Jews. I don't have to worry about it. Is that true? We have a parallel case regarding idolatry. Let's say I rent out a room to a non-Jew and he brings idols into the room. I once had a housekeeper who put crosses on the wall, right? So is that a problem or not? If they rented out the room, it's not mine. Or am I responsible because I am the owner? והתנן, אף במקום שאמרו להשכיר, לא לבית דירה אמרו, מפני שמכניסים לתוכו עבודת כלילים. There is a Mishnah that says, even in a place where you're allowed to rent out to non-Jews, there's a general prohibition not to rent out space to non-Jews because they're going to bring idolatry into your home. But even in a place where it is permitted, and generally today is permitted because we don't have so many idolaters around anymore, so still, you're allowed, even in those places, you're only allowed to rent it out for storage, but not for the person to actually live there, because if they live there, then they're more likely to bring the idols there. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now you see, even though I'm renting it out, I am responsible for the person, the renter, bringing idols there. And if you would think that renting out is that the non-Jew acquires it when he rents it, I should apply the same logic. He's going into his own house. I don't have to worry. He can do whatever he wants in his house. right? So that's the question. How come regarding chametz, it's permitted if I rent out the room, whereas regarding idolatry, it's not permitted? So we answer, Shaneh hachad apeked achamana bilshon lo yimase misha masui biadcha yasa zeh sheno masui biadcha. So regarding chametz, the language is lo yimatzeh. It cannot be found in your possession. In this case, it's not in your possession because you rented it out and it's in his possession. So therefore, chametz is a bit more lenient, whereas idolatry, I'm responsible to make sure there's no idolatry around, right? I don't want it near me. I want to stamp it out. And therefore, idolatry, even if I rent it out, I have to make sure that there's no idolatry in any home that I own. Okay, good. So we resolved that question. Now we're going to have 4 statements by Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. Rav is a first generation Amora. Rav Yehuda is his trusted student who repeats a lot of his Torah in the second generation. So they're all by the same name. That's the link between the next 4, although they all do relate to chametz as well. So the first one's going to be finding chametz on Pesach. What do you do on Pesach? You found chametz. Now what? Second, about putting a partition in front of a non-Jew's chametz. And then about bedikah, if you're going to leave your home 30 days before Pesach. And finally, about nullifying chametz. Okay, so let's see. The first one. Amar Rav Yehuda amar Rav, hamoseh chametz bebeto beyom tov, kofeh alav et hakeli. So you're on Yom Tov, and you're open a closet. All of a sudden, you see a box of cereal. You forgot it there. So what should you do? Well, you can't burn it because it's Yom Tov now, right? You can't get rid. You can't even move it because it's mukseh. Has no use, right? Therefore, you just take a bowl and put it over it. In other words, cover it. You won't see it, and people won't come and eat it by mistake. And then after Yom Tov, then you take it and burn it. Good. Amar Rava, im shel hekdeshu eno sarich. Now Rava was 4th generation, is commenting on the earlier statement and says, if the chametz was also hekdesh, right? In other words, I said this cereal, I'm donating it to the Bet HaMikdash. Okay, and then it's in the closet and I left it there, and I see it on Yom Tov. Then I don't have to cover it. Why? Because since it's Hekdesh, everyone's very, very careful regarding Hekdesh, okay? So no one's going to come to eat it by mistake. Hekdesh is like, a real serious thing. So therefore, I don't have to. My ta'ama, right? The reason is because everybody will distance themselves from it on their own. Notice again here the switch from Hebrew, right? To Aramaic. So again here, Rava's original words is the Hebrew, I would guess, are the Hebrew, and then the Talmud later on is saying, oh, what's the reason to explain Rava? And so this is the Aramaic explanation. So we have here is actually three generations, right? Rav Yehuda amar Rav, and then Rava, and then the stam of the Gemara. All right, so that's the first statement of their first statement. Second one, Avamar Rav Yehuda amar Rav, chemso shel goy oseh lo mechisa 10 tefachim mishum heker. ואם של הקדש הוא אינו צריך. מה טעמה? מבדל בדילה, ינשה מיניה. Second statement says, if I do it, there is chametz of a non-Jew, and it's in my home, right? But he owns it, I'm not responsible for it. Still, I shouldn't see it. It shouldn't be right there. I should make a mechitza. We talked before about being in a separate room. But let's say it's not in a separate room. Let's say I say, this side of the room is yours, right? That's also okay, but it should not be so accessible. You make a mechitza. Now, if it happens to be all hekdesh, not that it belongs to a non-Jew, but rather I had a whole bunch of chametz, I made a hekdesh, and it's on the side of the room. In that case, I don't need to make a mechitza. Why? Because people will separate from it automatically, because people are very, very careful when it comes to food that is holy, that belongs to the Bet HaMikdash. Okay, notice that there's almost parallel between the first statement and the second statement, except that in the first one, Rava is the one that talks about Hekdesh. And here, there's no statement, it's not Rava saying it. And the second one, it looks like it's all part of Rav's statement, and he's saying, this non-Jews you have to, and Hekdesh you don't have to. There's a little strange, this imbalance. Like, did Rav say it first, and then Rava applied it to this one, or right? What's going on here? So this is a good place to look at manuscripts. So here's the Vilna edition which we just read, but here's the Munich. It's right now. This is the only complete manuscript of the entire Talmud Bavli. It's found in the Munich library, and if you look carefully here, it says here's the first statement, Amarava, and here's the second one, Amarav Yehuda Amarav. Period. Amarava v'im shelekdesh eno sarich. So you see that the word, it does have rava twice, and so that's exactly parallel. So either Rava said it on one, and we assume it means the other one, or he said it on both. In another manuscript, it says Rabba with a he, but obviously it should be Rava with an aleph, because that would make more sense. But a lot of times these spellings change. In the Yemenite manuscript, which is considered the best manuscript, it's missing the entire second halacha altogether, which is pretty strange because the Marav Yudarav, they said two halachot. Why doesn't have it at all? I think this is because, see, that this halacha ends mivdal badil mineh. A lot of times the eye of the scribe will skip, and since the second halacha ends with the same words mivdal badil mineh, so you see that the scribe skipped this entire halacha. So although the Yemenite manuscript is the best, for most purposes, you see in this case, they skipped the halacha. So it's a good thing that we have lots of other manuscripts too. Okay, good. So that was fun. And third halacha. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav HaMefaresh v'Hayoseh b'Shayara. Kodem sheloshim yom en zakuk leba'er. Toch sheloshim yom zakuk leba'er. Someone goes on a caravan, means he's going on a long trip. So he's not going to be home before Pesach. So if he leaves 30 days before Pesach begins, then he does not have to do biur chametz. He's far enough away. He's not thinking about Pesach. But if he leaves on his trip within 30 days before Pesach starts, then he has to do bidikat chametz without a beracha. But he does bidikat chametz before he leaves on his trip. Good. That's the statement of Amar Yehuda Amarav. Now, Abaye, again, the fourth generation, and Rava are going to comment on this. Amar Abaye, had amat toch sheloshim yom zakuk leba'er, la amaran ela sheda'ato lachzor. Aval en da'ato lachzor, en zakuk leba'er. When does this apply, what Rav said? Only when the person is planning on returning to his home on Pesach, because that's why he has to do b'dikat chametz, because he's going to come home during Pesach, and right, there's going to be chametz all over the place, so he's got to make sure to do it. But if he's going on such a long trip that he's not going to come back until after Pesach, then what does he need to do b'dikat chametz for? So there'll be chametz around, there'll be some cookies, some crumbs, whatever. He doesn't have to worry about that because he's not going to be there. He's not going to come to eat it. Okay, so that's Abaye's statement. He's more lenient. Amar le Rava, what are you talking about, Rava? If the person is going to come back on Pesach, then even if he went away on Rosh Hashanah, he's planning on being there on Pesach. So he's going to walk into his house. There's going to be chametz around. He's got to do bidikah beforehand. This is relevant to anyone who has a summer home. So you close up in the summer, and maybe the next time you're going to be there is on Pesach. Let's say you're planning to go to your summer home on Pesach. Then you have to do bidikat chametz before you leave in the summer, right? Because you're going to be there, so you got to prepare it. So that makes sense. Ela marava hada amart kodem sheloshim yom en zakuk leba'er la amaran ela she'en da'ato lachzor. So he's saying, I'm going to explain Rav's statement differently. I agree with his statement, but here's how I interpret it. When we said before 30 days, you don't have to do b'dikat chametz, that was only when you're not returning. Aval da'ato lachzor, but if you're going to return on Pesach, afilu merosh Hashanah, zakuk leba'er, then you do have to. So according to him, if either you're going to be there on Pesach or you're left within 30 days, even if you're not going to be there on Pesach, you have to do b'dikat chametz. Good. That's that. Rava is consistent with his own opinion, but they said somewhere else. Rava, ha'oseh beto osar. Kodem sheloshim yom en zakuk leba'er, toch sheloshim yom zakuk leba'er. You take your house and you turn it into a warehouse, a storehouse. You fill it up with grain. So if there is chametz, it's all the way on the bottom and it's not accessible. That's another important principle. If the chametz is not accessible to you, then you don't have to worry about it. And so if you're going to fill up your house with stuff, with boxes, if it's before 30 days, so you don't have to do b'dikat chametz. Whereas if it's within 30 days of Pesach, then do B'dikat Chametz first, and then you can fill it up with other things. So in other words, filling up your house is the same as going away. Either way, your home is not going to be accessible to you. And then we add, Rava adds, קודם שלושים נמה, למה רן אלא שאין דעתו לפנותו, אבל דעתו לפנותו, אפילו קודם שלושים יום נמה, זקוק לבער. And that only applies if you're not going to remove all the storage things on Pesach. But if you're planning on removing everything, and then you're going to be, then the chametz that's underneath will be accessible, then even if it's before 30 days, do b'dikat chametz first, because I know I'm going to be removing everything and using this house on Pesach, then you have to do b'dikat chametz before you fill it up. Okay, good. So
Rabbi.
all that everybody assumed 30 days. That's what in Rav's statement. 30 days is the cutoff point. And now we're going to wonder, what's so important about 30 days? Hane shiloshim yom, mai abidetaihu? Kidetanya, sho'alin v'doshin belchot ha-pesach, kodam ha-pesach shiloshim yom. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, shete shabbatot. So famous baraita that we begin teaching the laws, going back and forth about the laws of Pesach, 30 days before. Rabban Shimon Gamliel says, no, only 2 weeks. That's enough to start preparing everyone to learning the halachot of Pesach. So you see, 30 days, right? That's the time that people already start thinking about Pesach. Okay, everybody here in this group, we're being very mahmir. We're thinking about Pesach 120 days before, so we're good. Why? Okay, still now, why is what's the source for these two opinions? The Tanakama. How do you know 30 days? שהרי משה עומד בפסח ראשון ומזהיר על פסח שני, שנאמר, ויעשו בני ישראל את הפסח במועדו. וכתיב, ויהי אנשים אשר היו טמאים לנפש אדם. So this is all in Bamidbar, chapter 9, which I'll show you here. So this is in the second year after they left Egypt, in the first month, in Nisan. And Moshe gets up and says, hey, it's Nisan, everybody listen, we have to make the Pesach. And on the 14th, this is what you should do, and he gives them instructions. And then in Pasuk Vav, we see that there are people who were tameh, and they couldn't make the Pesach, and they came to Moshe and says, so what should we do? We can't make the Pesach. And so he says, okay, fine, you'll make it next month on Pesach Sheni. Yet this is still a month before, right? While he's teaching the people, everyone about the first Pesach, he's telling that group about the next Pesach. So you see, he's teaching them from a month before the Pesach Sheni. So just like he's teaching the month before Pesach Sheni, so too, a month before the regular Pesach, we should start learning about the halachot. Okay, good. That's the first source. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel amar lecha, Aidi de'aire b'milet defischa, masik lehu lechol milet defischa. Says that's not a good proof. There it just happened to be. Since he was already teaching everyone about the first Pesach, so while he was at it, he taught the other group, the Tameh group, about Pesach Sheni, because he's talking about it anyway. But that doesn't mean that before the first Pesach you have to go a month before. So there's no proof from there. So instead, my Tamad Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. So why does he say 2 weeks? שהרי משה עומד בראש החודש ומזהיר על הפסח שנאמר החודש הזה לכם ראש חודשים. So this is, now we learn it from Shemot Yud Bet. This is about the first year on Pesach, right? Moshe says today this is going to be the first month. In other words, this is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And then later on in that same perek, וכתיב דברו אל כל עדת ישראל לאמור בעשור לחודש הזה ויקחו להם איש לבית אבות. And he says, listen, on the 10th day of this month you're going to take a lamb, and then he gives them all the laws of Pesach. When does he do this? At the beginning of Nisan. That's 2 weeks before Pesach. Excellent. Now we question that. ממאי דברש ידך כאה, דילמה בארבעה בידך או בחמישה בידך כאה. Wait, how do you know he's teaching them on Rosh Chodesh itself? Maybe it's the 4th or 5th day of the month. Doesn't specify exactly. I know he does say this is the first month of the year, but then after that, maybe he waited 3-4 days to start telling them the laws of Pesach. So not a full 2 weeks. So Ela Amar Rabba bar Shimi mishemeh de Rabina mehacha. וידבר השם אל משה במדבר סיני בשנה השנית בחודש הראשון. וכתיב ויעשו בני ישראל את הפסח במועדו. So maybe we're learning it from the second year, the Pasukim we just read from Bamidbar, where again Moshe is teaching them the laws of Pesach during Nisan. And so it says in the second year, in the first month. So can't we assume that it's the beginning of the month? And he's teaching them that will be 2 weeks before. No, no, here too, the Pesukim don't specify that he's teaching them on Rosh Chodesh. Maybe he's teaching them on the 4th or 5th of the month. There's still no proof. אמר רב נחמן בר יצחק, אתה מדבר ממדבר, כתיב אחר במדבר סיני, וכתיב התם וידבר השם אל משה במדבר סיני בעול מועד באחד לחודש השני. מה להלן בראש חודש? אף כאן בראש חודש. I'll show you in the Pesukim. So Bimidbar chapter 1 says that in Bechad LaChodesh Hasheni Bashana Shanit, in the second year, the second month, the first day. So this is clear that Bimidbar Perek Aleph is talking about the first day. And so since this is talking about the first day, and this is the word Bimidbar, so chapter 9, you see, has very similar language, and it says it's also the second year, first month, and he's telling them all the laws of Pesach. So therefore, since you see how similar it is, we can assume that this is also the beginning look at something to pay attention to. This says the second year, the second month. Okay, this is already the second month. The Iyar is when Bimidbar Aleph starts off. And he says, go and count the people. That's talking about the second month. Bimidbar chapter 9 actually goes backwards in time, and this is now the second year, the first month. Okay, so it's not the same day, but since here this says this was the first of the month, of the second month, we can assume this is also the first of the month, although this is the first month. And so that's how we can learn it from a kind of a gezer hashava between these two.
Are they not going to are they not aware of the midrash, or do they not want to bring the midrash about hazeh? It says, why is the hazeh? Hazeh is in the implication that Hashem showed him the moon, the new moon.
Yeah, which hazeh?
Chodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chodeshim.
Chodesh hazeh, right? But that's pasuk. That pasuk can be on Rosh Chodesh, but then the next pasuk doesn't necessarily mean that was a continuation of the speech on the very same day, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So good. So that's an answer. We accept that answer. But now we have a bigger question about these two chapters, right? Because Bimidbar Perek Aleph takes place in the second month of the second year. Bimidbar chapter 9 takes place in the first month of the second year. They're out of chronological order. So we wonder about that. We should change the order of these Perakim. Put chapter 9 first. That was talking about Pesach in the first month, and then bring chapter 1, which is in the second month, make the census. Why are the verses out of order in the Torah? אמר רב מנשיה בר תחליפה משמי דרב, זאת אומרת אין מוקדם ומאוחר בתורה. This is one of the major sources for this famous principle that there is no chronological order in the Torah. The Torah follows other orders, sometimes a logical order or a thematic order, but not necessarily chronological order. Here it's very clear. In other cases, you don't have the exact dates. So since we know that here we have a principle that Torah does not always speak in chronological order, therefore this is a useful principle in other cases too, and it can solve problems. Okay, good. This is a very important Gemara to remember. Excellent. Amar Rav Papa, la amaran ela betre inyane, ava bechad inyana, may de mukdam mukdam, or may de meochar meochar. Papa, it gives a limitation on this principle. It says we only say that there's no chronological order when it's talking about two different matters. Like in this case, one's talking about the census, and another's talking about Pesach. Two different matters, you can put them out of order. But if it's one matter, one story, one issue, then within it, it has to be in order. That makes sense. And what's this proof? So we learn this from, there's a principle of interpretation that says anytime you have a klal uperat, you have a generality and then a specific and then specifics. So it says, if you find something that someone lost, you have to return it. If it's a shirt, right, an animal, and it lists specific things. So there's a general and a principle. Well, which one is it? Do I have to return anything or only specific things? So the principle is The general is only is limited by what's in the specifics. Right. So that has to be in order. Otherwise, it will be the opposite rule. The opposite rule is this: vetu piratu klal. If I have specifics and then a general, then naaseh kilal musaf ala pirat dima klalu pratu. There, the rule is that if there's a specific and then general, you follow the generality. But if it's out of order, then how would you know which one it is? Let me just take a second to explain these rules. You always go by the second of the examples. So I'll just give an example in common language. If I say, can you get me a drink, orange juice? Then it probably means I actually want orange juice, right? I said a drink in general, but specifically, I really want orange juice. So that's the second thing that matters. If I say the opposite way, can you get me orange juice, a drink? Then I probably want any drink. I don't care which one it is. I just said an example, but really the point is the drink. So it's usually the second one that qualifies and is the actual legally important thing. So therefore, you see that in these matters, the order makes a big difference, and so therefore, within one matter, you can't change the order. The order is very specific. Wait a second. If so, then even with two matters, maybe you have a prat and then a klal that are across some distance. So honey, and then you'd also have to be in order. So all this would be fine according to the one who says we do not apply klal uprat when they're not right next to each other. So they're far apart from each other. Then, since they're far apart, you can have those be out of chronological, and we don't apply klal uprat when they're far apart. So then something that's far apart can be in the wrong order. But the one who does say that we do apply klal uprat law even in things that are far apart, then what about them? How are they gonna reconcile this first statement? Even the one who says I can apply klal uprat to things that are far away still has to be within the same topic, the same matter, but not if they're two different matters. And so therefore, that still fits together with everything. It still reconciles with what Papa says, that we would not apply it if it's in the same matter. So therefore, if it's talking about the same subject, that has to be in order. If it's talking about different subjects, then it can be out of chronological order. All right, very good. And now, finally, we get to the last halacha, Marav Yuda Amarav. Habodek sarich sheyevatel. Yeah, I know we have to do bedikat chametz, and you went around in your house and you checked and you found all the chametz. Nevertheless, after you do bedikat chametz, you have to do bitul. You have to nullify. You say any chametz that's around in my house is negligible. It's not important to me. I don't care about it. Now, why? I just checked for the chametz. Why do I have to do that also? My ta'ama inema mishum perurin. Maybe it's because of some crumbs, right? There's some crumbs around that I wasn't able to sweep up. But those are not important in and of themselves. I don't have to say they're not important. Nobody cares about crumbs, right? Nobody thinks that, that crumb is important to me. And therefore, if you don't think about it, then it's not considered owning chametz. But maybe you'll say, yeah, but since it's in my house, when I lock the door in my house, I'm guarding everything in my house, including the crumbs. And so the fact that it's in my home and guarded, maybe you'll say that act in itself gives it importance, even though they're crumbs. But this is not true, because look at the following analogy. So let's say there's a few figs left on the trees, just the leftovers, bad figs. And I'm guarding my field because of the grapes. But I'm guarding the whole field. Or the opposite, there's a few grapes left that are not good. I don't care about those grapes. And I'm guarding because of the gourds or because of the cucumbers. So I am guarding indirectly. I'm guarding the things that are just leftovers I don't care about. So what's the status of those? Can someone else come and take the little raisins, the bad grapes that are left over? Because I'm guarding them. So if the owner cares about them and says, I'm going to get around to it. I like those grapes. I didn't take them now, but I want them. So then a person who comes out from outside and takes them would be liable as a thief, and you have to give maaser because they're important to you. However, בזמן שאין בעל הבית מקפיד עליהן, מותרים משום גזל ופטורים משום מעשר. But if the owner doesn't care about them, then anyone can come and take them, and I don't have to give maaser. They're not important. So you see here, even though I'm standing on guarding that, then guarding it, it doesn't matter because those specific things are not important to me. I don't own them. Same thing with the house. I'm locking my house because I want to protect all the valuable things, my TVs, my jewelry, and so on. Now there also happens to be some crumbs in the house of chametz, but I don't care about those crumbs, and therefore someone would come into my house and steal my crumbs. I wouldn't mind. Okay, so therefore you see that it doesn't matter. So why do I have to do bitul, right? So now we're left with the same question. I did bidikat chametz, so there's a few crumbs in the house. That doesn't matter to anybody. So here's the answer. Amar Rava, Gezerah shema yimsa geluska yafa vedate ilave. Not because of the crumbs, but because maybe there's a roll or a cookie behind the couch, and I'm gonna looking for my remote on Pesach. I'm gonna find this cookie. I'm gonna say, oh, look at this nice cookie, right? And then I'm going to think about it, and want it. So that's why I have to do bitul, just in case for this something that I found. Now we ask, wait, it doesn't matter. So, and when I find it, I should say, oh, a cookie, bitul. I don't care about this cookie. Just whenever I find it, I'll do bitul. No, that's no good. Dilma mashkachat le lebatar isura. This is an interesting paradox. What's the value of a cookie on Pesach? The value is zero. There's no market for it. I can't go and sell it to anybody, right? And so therefore, since the value is zero, I can't even do bitul. I cannot relinquish my rights to it because you can only relinquish your rights to something that has value. But this is valueless. So therefore, I can't even do bitul. And yet, if I take it and say, "Oh, what a nice cookie," so now I would violate Pesach and not have the ability to do bitul. So the point is, you can only do bitul before Pesach starts. When it actually has value, then I can devalue it, but it has to have value in order to be devalued. Okay, good. This is going to be an important principle for the next stuff. We'll just end with the last paragraph here. Damar Rabbi Elazar, shenet devarim enan b'shuto shel adam, v'asa'an k'hakatub ki'ilu b'shuto. Velohen bor b'shut harabim v'chames mishesh sha'ot ulema'ala. He says there are two things that are not in your possession, technically, legally, but the Pesukim make it as if, in other words, we're still responsible for it, even though it's not in our possession. And that is a pit in the public domain. If I go and dig a pit in the public domain, I don't own it. It's in the street. I don't have ownership over it. But if someone falls into it, I am responsible. So I'm responsible as if I own it. And the same thing with chametz from 6 hours and on, even though I don't own, there's no ownership of it because it has no value. I can't own something that has no market value. Yet I do violate the prohibition of owning chametz because I'm responsible for it. Even though I don't own it, I still am responsible for having it. And so that's a very important principle that we will continue with tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Olam. Amen ve'amen.